The world reels, the world dies. Atlas actually means, Atlas coming from Atlantis, the word actually means the one who could not withstand the skies. Ireland is actually known today to be called the Blessed or Fortunate Isles. Why? Because it was known to the people there, you see, that it had actually survived this cataclysm. That's why it was given that name. The Egyptian papyrus says that south becomes north and the earth turns over. The Bible and the apocryphal works tell us the earth is utterly broken down, moved exceedingly. Moved exceedingly? Isaiah 24 says, Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. What, this writer's on drugs now? Oh no. 2 Peter 3 says, For this they were willingly ignorant. I love that, willingly ignorant. The world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. The only place that could sustain life after that period was the area of the new equator, where our equator basically is now, in what we call Asia Minor. So the remnants of the Atlanteans set up their bases, set up their new headquarters after a semblance of normality has returned in what we know to be Mesopotamia. That's where the Sumerian, Babylonian cultures of blood, the tyrannies, the first aggressive, empires arose. And aren't all modern civilizations and cultures based on those patterns? Well, guess who was set up there? And it's from that area that they decided, these guys are pretty amazing, they decided that they weren't going to give up. They're raped of all of their technology. I mean, if the continents beneath your feet have gone down, so have all your temple citadels. So has all your crystalline technology and computers. So has a lot of your spacecrafts and certainly your weaponry. Remember that old Superman? They're telling you the whole story in Superman. Who is the Superman who comes from another planet, who's got this temple precinct full of computers and has remarkable powers and comes from out there? Well, that's all gone. It's like your old frontier western guys, if they take the gun off them, they feel naked. Well, think you got those kinds of guns. You may have it all up here, but if you don't have the tools, the hardware, what good are you? So you know what these guys actually decided to do? Is to artificially influence and manipulate the flow of history itself and move mankind forward. We can't talk about it a lot right now, but it's described in the DVDs and books about how they decide to move mankind forward artificially. So many people have asked, why is it that our technology and scientific ability, is so far in advance of our emotional, psychological? Well, there's the reason. Because somebody's been pushing it that way. It's not natural. So the loss of their technological hardware was a major setback and predicament for the Atlantean serpents. They decided to manipulate the flow of history, the destiny of their Adamic progeny, pushing us ever forward to the point where the super technological hardware that was destroyed in the War of the Gods could be reproduced. Some instruments and weapons had survived, and these were sequestered in underground chambers in temple precincts referred to as the Holy of Holies. Not because they contained anything holy, but they just didn't want you going near it. Because it was the remnants of their technology. Now, one thing I omitted to tell you earlier about the fact of the pursuit when the Nephilim first came to our planet is something else of extraordinary importance. When the pursuers of the Nephilim destroyed the planet Tiamat, they made haste to leave our solar system to avoid the cosmic upheavals created by their action. However, for some reason, they took extraordinary precautions to prevent their enemies, should they still be alive on our planet, from ever leaving. They erected a powerful etheric energy barrier around our entire planet. This enveloping shield still exists, and no one on Earth, with the alien DNA, can physically break through it or go beyond it. I refer to that in my book as the real Stargate. And all the ancient cultures talk about it. The all-encompassing shield. And they refer to it as the dragon. It's always shown as the dragon, surrounding something of great price. Even rings today, you'll buy jewelry with a dragon, encircling a pearl or a diamond or a gem. Where does that image come from? The Pista Sophia, a Gnostic book, says the outer darkness is a huge dragon whose tail is in its mouth. In Revelation 8, we read about it. The fifth angel. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth. And to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Because the earth is now in quarantine. God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Now, about the time of the 15th century, as they were congratulating themselves on this progress of trying to build back, their technology, they were doing pretty good up until the 15th century. It's then that the alien bureaucracy discovered the presence of this Stargate. They had to face the fact that even if all their technological hardware was successfully reconstructed, they still couldn't vacate the planet Earth. which had been placed under quarantine. They're laboring away to move mankind forward for countless thousands of years. And then when they have enough flying saucers, as William Bramley proves, those saucers existed in the 15th century. They take them up there and they're bouncing back. They had a massive predicament. What to do? And many of the idioms that happen on this planet since the 15th century are explained by this. But undaunted by this discovery, the alien progeny decided to press ahead. They put their greatest intellectuals onto the problem to see if a solution could be found, believing that what technology could erect, technology could take down. The major dynasties of the planet underwrote occultists, scholars, scientists, and philosophers to work on the Stargate problem. Elaborate efforts were also made to cover up the existence of the real opus. The perfect covers came to be that of both science and occultism. And it was so effective that even today most students or practitioners of both science and magic are unaware of the practical importance of their work and to whom it is of benefit. Those of the inner sanctums also adopt clever cover acts and stories in order to be able to work undetected. Fronts are utilized by all major criminal syndicates, and it's no different with the children of the Nephilim, who have a great deal to hide from public view. And the top of the Nephilim bloodline during the 15th century was Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. And she put her top mystics and scientists onto the job. The man on the left is John Dee, her own court astrologer, and he worked also with a clairvoyant from Ireland called Edward Kelly. And they were put onto the problem. Dee is an interesting character because he turns out to be the original 007. He used to sign his name 007. And he also is the creator of the British intelligence, secret intelligence, the first ever secret police of the world that's now MI5. And the symbol is very curious, isn't it? Because it looks remarkably similar, does it not, to the symbols we were looking at a little earlier. Now, John Dee was one of the most powerful black magicians in history. He decided that it would be better to contact pan-dimensional intelligences to solve their little problem of quarantine. Via his system of magic and divination, he succeeded in opening a portal to these fourth-dimensional entities, or oversouls. Dee became a living macroscope. This is not the first time in Earth history when such a forbidden rite was undertaken. Every time it occurs, it has the severest repercussions for history. Macroscope? That's right. If somebody had told us that under our level of sensual perception, there's a whole microbe world of microbes and little organisms and a whole ecostructure there, we'd have thought they were raving lunatics. We'd probably taken them down to the square and burned them as a witch. But then along comes the invention of the microscope, and suddenly we're convinced and, roll over and forget about it. Well, above the level of human perception are the macrobes, right? Oversouls. Not necessarily positive, but a whole other race of beings. That's what the philosophers are telling us. And John Dee decided that he has to contact those individuals to see if they have any answers to the problem. And they did. He became a living macroscope, literally opening himself up as a human portal to these entities. Now, in short, Dee was told that there were two cardinal premises which needed to be mastered before the Stargate could be opened. The first concerned creating matter from energy, but that would have to be revealed in two main stages. And the second key had to do with the properties of a certain element that we know as silicon. All right? Releasing energy from matter was what the first phase was. They said, you're too dumb to know how to, make matter from energy. We have to spend years showing you the opposite. How to release energy from matter. So in 1945, when the atom was split and the bomb was, detonated, that was the moment when phase one was completed. And they could then, from 1945 till now, move on to literally the nanotechnologies which are in vogue now of trying to make matter from energy. And the second phase involved silicon, which of course implies what? The computer. And the symbolism lets us know what's going on, if you know how to decode it. The half-open door always represents knowledge being revealed, secret knowledge being revealed. It's a Masonic symbol. And again, the purveyance of spiritual and mystical and magical symbolism, we'd wonder what is under the subtext there. Because we've got symbols that are telling us in the technological world what the real agenda is. We've got pyramids and earths. Again, we've got pyramids ascending up into the sky to break through into another world outside of the sky. We've got pyramids and striations, Masonic striations. We've got the American Business Award given right here in the Bay Area. But what does the award look like? A Masonic pyramid. There's the idea is to break out of here. The whole Atlantis shuttle bit is part of that. Because they don't like it here. They think of this place as terrible, as the old Templar inscription at Rennes-le-Château says. This place is terrible. But they don't mean France and Rennes-le-Château. They mean the planet itself. Now, up until now, even with the vast majority of their sophisticated technical hardware again in their possession, the progeny of the Atlanteans are not able to break out of quarantine or out of their internment on the Earth, this silent planet. The commission to build a craft to go beyond the moon has been even privatized. Paul Allen announced his prototype craft on May 15th, the Mercuralia. The day that the world Illuminati meet, by the way, is May 15th. It's a very important day. It's the day the Matrix movie was also released. HAARP waves, microwaves, are continually being beamed onto the ionosphere to superheat the sky, to try and make a breakthrough passage. Go and ask Nick Bijak why HAARP is millions of volts stronger than it was ever meant to be on paper. They have no answer for you. In fact, it's so much superheated the ozone layer, the ionosphere, that the ozone layer hole got created than they told you at CFCs and your McDonald's cartons. But the most important question is, why the big hurry? Why are they, moving technology forward in order to get out of this planet? This brings us up to the conclusion as to why they'd be moving so fast. There are many theories I want to share with you, but the first one involves a thing that is known colloquially as the photonic energy band, or the photon belt, that's meant to be coming about December 21st, 2012, as the Mayan calendar predicts. That at that time, our solar system and all of its planets move through a band of highly ionized, highly photonic energy, which has severe consequences for anyone who's toxic. Because light has certain spiritual principles, and photons are the highest form of light that we know physically. Mother Nature knows how to clean herself. There's a spin-dry cycle coming for the planet and the solar system. Get ready. The photon effect, Robert Stanley says that he reported on the discovery of the photon band by satellite in 1991. He says Barbara Han Clow actually talks about it in her Palladian Agenda. She says that the excesses of photons are being emitted from the center of our galaxy. Our solar system enters the area of our galaxy every 11,000 years and then passes through for 2,000 years while completing its 26,000-year galactic orbit. We read that the photon effect is caused by the precession of our solar system and its accompanying planets around the central sun, called Alcyone. This counterclockwise cyclic precession around Alcyone requires about 26,000 years to make one complete orbit. Our present-day sun, moon, and planets must twice pass through the photon belt during this time. That is, once to the north and once to the south. During this cycle, there are 2 periods of darkness and 2 periods of light. The periods of darkness, which constitute the vast majority of that rotation, consist of 2 periods of about 11,000 years. Following each period of 11,000 years or so of darkness, we then emerge into 2,000 years of total light, which actually constitutes the photon belt. So what they're saying is that the north and southern points of that great orbit are periods of 2,000 years where the whole of our solar system passes through that. It's what it is literally the roach cleaner on his way. Right? In a year, doesn't nature go through her spin-dry cycle? It's the same way up the fractal. It's the same way up the Fibonacci series. The photon belt was discovered in 1961 by satellite-borne instruments. It comes around every 10,000 years or so. I mean, all these points can be debated, by the way. There's a lot of debate on this, but this is just the basics. Earth is thought to have entered the outer perimeter already. The sun's radiation, they say, will be, well, of course, it's the biggest light source of our solar system, so, of course, photonic energy, definitely going to affect it. Electrons will be affected. Everything around you is made of them. And this will generate photonic radiation. If the sun enters the belt first, it will disappear and darkness will ensue. That's the famous 3 days of darkness. If the earth does, then the entire sky will appear to be on fire. All things will emit light and phosphorescence. Darkness will not exist. And some people are even speculating that it'll affect our DNA. Deepak Chopra says that photons come out of nowhere. They cannot be stored. They can barely be pinned down in time. And they have no home in space whatsoever. That is, light occupies no volume and has no mass. The similarity between a thought, and this is interesting, the similarity between a thought and a photon is very deep. Both are born in the region beyond space and time where nature controls all processes in that void, which is full of creative intelligence. So it's connected. Light and thought are connected. Jeremy Narbury, talking about the biophotonic action, says, in the early 1980s, thanks to the development of a sophisticated measurement device, a team of scientists demonstrated that the cells of all living beings emit photons at a rate of up to approximately 100 units per second per square centimeter of surface area. They also showed that DNA, well, literally was the source of that photonic emission. So photon band equals changes in your DNA. Whatever the changes are, it doesn't concern me that much. But I just want to know there's a link. Well, hasn't the mythologies and the religions been telling us that anyway? That you are the temple of God, the sun of the universe is inside you, you're the intelligence? So we have the photon band concept, but there's something else that needs to be understood. Constellational alignments. In my DVD 2012, that's what this deals with. Because there's other things that you need to know about concerning this, because that might happen very soon, from 2007 onwards, in fact. And the most famous one of those, of course, is the Maya date of 2012 and the so-called Age of Revealing. You can't think about the 2012 date without thinking of what the Maya called their last 13-year countdown. Well, that last 13-year countdown obviously started in 1999. The exact midway point of that was November 8th, 2003. Well, we're already way past that. We're already past the halfway date of the last countdown of 13 years. That is why we're going to be seeing those changes very, very rapidly. And it also makes sense for all the saber rattling and the moral, political, economic climate that we're seeing right now. The Mayas called it the Age of Revealing. At sunrise on December 21st, 2012, for the first time in 26,000 years, the sun rises to conjunct the intersection of the Milky Way and the plane of the ecliptic. Okay, this is astrological jargon. If you're not familiar, just bear with us. This cosmic cross is considered to be an embodiment of the sacred tree, the tree of life, a tree remembered in all the world's spiritual traditions. Some observers say this alignment with the heart of the galaxy in 2012 will open a channel for cosmic energy to flow through the earth, cleansing it and all that dwells upon it, raising it all to a higher level of vibration. In 2012, the plane of the solar system will line up exactly with the plane of our galaxy, the Milky Way. This cycle has taken 26,000 years to complete. The alignment was recorded by the Maya, whose calendar was said to arise from a phenomena referred to as the sacred tree. Is it any accident that the greatest humanitarians who've walked very close to humanity and who've loved us and tried to teach us this, all of this methodology and this message of psychic cleaning and the great Armageddon, that their movies should come back into vogue exactly after these periods? At the equinoxes and the solstices of the world? Is there any accident why those movies work on many levels? And how many secrets we're being told there about the great Armageddon? And the fighting between the forces of light and darkness? One of the most other important events, which even precedes the 2012 date, is the coming of the planet Pluto across into the galactic center. Astrologically, Pluto, the planet of destruction, or if you prefer, deconstruction, and radical change, will be crossing galactic center and channeling that energy from the central sun. All planets are like little lenses, right? It's not so much that the planet generates energy itself, it channels energy from what is known as galactic center, where all the spiritual energy comes. And the planets that move in front of that locus focus cosmic energy in different ways, just like you put different filters in front of the lights. Mercury has just been crossing the meridian. When Pluto crosses the meridian, and Pluto is the channeler for the galactic center's energy, you're going to feel it. Right? You don't feel the sun so much, and you don't feel the Mercury and the smaller planets. You're going to feel this. It takes about 250 years for Pluto to complete one circuit of the zodiac, or 12 signs. Pluto is presently approximately about 24 degrees of Sagittarius. When it moves into Capricorn, the sign of order and government, it brings cataclysmic upheavals and exposure of all corruption in order to restore harmony and a higher way of being. The individual lives will be dramatically transformed. Pluto brings in deep cleansing cycle to the psyche of human beings. From Robert Hand, the great philosopher, the great astrologer, he says the nature of Pluto is similar to that of the Hindu god Shiva. Pluto usually begins by breaking down a structure. then creates a new one in its place. The entire cycle of death, destruction, and renovation is accompanied by tremendous powers, for Pluto is not a mild or even very subtle planetary influence. It brings decay at one level or another. It also rules the death and regeneration of the self, as old aspects of your life pass away. Pluto does not represent death in the literal sense. Instead, it refers to a metaphorical death, something that just ceases to be. Well, that entity, that compulsion within the psyche that the planets represent, is moving into prime position. Now, the dark side, or the perverse manifestation, because every symbol, every planetary influence you see has a positive and a negative side. Its perverse manifestation is in the unhealthy obsessions with death, perverse sex, and with breaking taboos, etc. The media is co-opting this and is already serving this aspect. Those forensic shows, right? Digging up corpses, CSI, looking beneath the surface, you see, wondering how things tick, infatuation with the body and its biology, and corpses and rotting stuff. Something wrong with it. It's part of a Plutonic archetype. Those reality shows and TV shows, they're co-opting it. They're ahead of us, you see. They know what's coming. And they're warming us up with the new mythography. But basically, Pluto draws attention to all the unhealthy aspects of life, psychologically and socially. It brings upheaval and drags down the masks and deposes false icons and gods. All that exposure that's happening with Michael Jackson and Martha Stewart and whatnot. Why do you think that's happening? Because the masks are coming down. And it's going to shock both the antagonists and the protagonists. I assume you're protagonists. Well, I'm here to tell you that you better know what's going to be happening to those you have intimate connections with and intimate relationships and so on. This opening is greatly disturbing to the ego that will rather self-destruct than face its own shadows. Right? The ego is threatened by this. Pluto is the planetary ruler of what we call the underworld cycle. In the tarot, its card is number 13, death. And its action is catabolic. It breaks down. And the first thing that you're going to feel it breaking down is your relationships. That's where it hits the hardest. Pluto is connected to the alchemical wedding, what the alchemists call the chemical wedding. But what we don't read in all these flowery books about the chemical wedding is that one cannot achieve this elusive thing, the chemical wedding, without first experiencing a chemical divorce. One cannot attain the truth without first confronting and removing all that is false from the self. This action, ruled by Pluto, and in mythology we have Shiva, Durga, Kali, and Merlin, etc., representing that aspect, is deeply threatening to the ego of man, which wants to hold on to the status quo. Pluto, the dissolver, is closely associated with Uranus, the planet archetype of freedom, individuality, and rebellion. You know, the punk era, and a lot of the countercultural bands and movements that have been happening since the 60s, that's ruled by Pluto and Uranus, to expose corruption and show people how to be free and break the Saturnian patterns. Pluto and Uranus are already working to dissolve the common dependency-based relationships that men and women crave and which keep them estranged from selfhood and deep psychological maturation. Pluto is nature's hygienist, her psychic surgeon, which enters to rid us of all that is toxic, calcified, false, and unsustainable. It has to do this, because we've been taking for granted too many things. You know, when the safety net is removed from beneath your feet as you cross the tightrope, how reverently you now walk that tightrope that you took. Yeah. How reverently every step is taken. That's what's happening. The ladders are being pulled up on the middle class right now. Pluto in ancient world was actually Shiva. There's no difference. But what you haven't been told is that Shiva equals the Holy Spirit. My work goes into this. That they have their trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, right? God, Son, Holy Spirit. Well, Shiva is the part that corresponds in the Hindu trinity to the Holy Spirit. So it's coming in, ladies and gentlemen. It's not Pluto, some archetype, some planet you needn't worry about. There is a connection here to something incredibly important. Now, man's psyche is unclean. Everything is cleaned, but not the human psyche. Man's relationships of the old Piscean, Saturnian type are chronically dependency-based. We are emotional and psychological prostitutes. Totally living on the surface of ourselves, projecting our own dark content externally onto others, and enslaving others to our needs and desires. And then we call this love. But it is the dark, secret love of the poets, and has nothing to do with freedom and advancement. The physical kind of prostitution, that's small potatoes. We are inherently dependent on others. I need you, you need me. We call that relationship today. We're living on the surface of ourselves, in the persona world, in the ego world. And all the dislikes that we have about ourselves and other people, we repress, as the psychologists have warned us. And it becomes the shadow. Well, Pluto is connected to the shadow. We don't need psychologists to tell us, though, that we have a Jekyll and a Hyde. And we have this personal shadow that we often project onto other people. The dark aspects of the personal psyche, which threaten the ego's autonomy, are repressed. They are also subconsciously projected onto others who become external representatives of our shadow self. This projection occurs as a compensation for the inner psychic tension we feel as a result of that repression. In severe cases, we also process this content through the field of others. And then there's also the collective psyche and its dark content, which is likewise projected. Right? You have your individual shadow. The world has its shadow that sometimes through history gets projected on others. What do we get when we don't cleanse the inner being then? Given that we do not do this shadow work, what is it that we get when we do not do it? Well, the masses of men and women in the Western world compulsively avoid true, authentic psychoanalytical investigation of their natures, particularly in regards to the so-called darker aspects of the personality. However, not dealing with the psyche at all proves systemically hazardous. Right? A compromise is required. Hence the proliferation of the New Age philosophy and movement together with its many permutations. Riddled with ego-customized shams and gimmicks, the application of its methods serve for the most part to merely bolster the failing ego and its drives. Being that dark and toxic within, we gave rise to the sadism of our world, and the masochism and the ecocide that it comes about in our world as the manifestation of rape and murder and cruelty towards others. But I am interested in cruelty towards others, yes. But I'm more interested in how we are cruel to ourselves. I'm not smart enough. We're not attractive enough. We're not tall enough. We're not thin enough. We're not rich enough. We're not social or active enough. We're not witty enough. I'm not still enough. I can't control my mind. I'm not in control enough. I'm not caring and I'm not giving enough. I'm not holy enough. I'm not perfect enough. We observe in this world, granted, we've got pretty good, at knowing, defining the cruelty to others. Thank God. We are extremely backward in noticing how we're just cruel to ourselves. Let's start observing that. Because if you're sadistic towards the self, which they call masochism, but it's really sadism to the self, you're inherently going to be sadistic to others. And we have this illusion of normalcy. When we say we desire to live in a peaceful, harmonious world and see beauty all around us, what we often really mean is that we wish we could edit out from our view that ugliness we don't want to see, and which disturbs our ego's image of perfection. We do anything to anesthetize ourselves from the pain of the real. So living in harmony doesn't mean not looking at the dirt. We all want to live forever, but no one wants to age. We want to know everything, but we don't want to open our minds. We want to avoid pain, but never find out why pain arises in our life. We all want freedom, but don't know what to do with it when we get it. Or we abuse it when we have it. We all want the light, but we're afraid of facing the dirt that the light might reveal. There's a couple of different actions that light has, don't forget. We want others to fill us, but we can't fill ourselves or another. We want to see reality as it really is, but don't want to see ourselves as we really are. As Vernon Howard, the great American philosopher, said, human sickness is so severe that few can bear to look at it, but those who do will become well. That requires a certain kind of courage, the courage you're all going to need in the next lot of years. Not to look out and worry about tyrants on Capitol Hill, but the tyrant within, the syzygy, the schizoid nature of your inner republic. Or all the knights sitting at your round table within? If they're not, then don't tell me about politics. And don't try to fix the outer ambiance. The magical tradition, which is another bequeathment of our ancient forefathers. Because that's actually my main work. Those who've been part of my online mystery school or taken my classes know that. That my work is mainly with the divination arts, tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, numerology. Why? Well, it's just like I talked about yoga a few minutes ago. These are the ways that our forefathers already created for us. We don't need to create anything new. They already did it. They created us the tools, the plutonic tools for helping to clean our psyche. I've just created another website. I'm so concerned, you see. I am very concerned about what's going to be happening in the next 7 years. There's movements and actions happening which is removing our power more and more every day. So we need to defend ourselves by bolstering our own defenses and empowering ourselves. The way to do that is through the magical arts. Now, if we do not autonomously clean our psyches and strive to live morally, and if we continue to violate the natural order because of our inner emotional state, we will allow the ego to manifest surrogate channels to exercise its repressions and other negative debris. In short, if we give up the right rulership of the self, we inevitably breed Orwellian political and religious tyrants to take over the job and turn us into what George Simmel called the smiling depressives, or worse. All right? Or Carl Jung said it much more simply. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside of you as fate. When you are that toxic inside and you're not knowing how to deal with it, I mean, you clean everything, don't you? But if you don't clean our psyche, then we give rise to the worst kind of people. The worst kind of monstrosities that exist. In TV land, we marvel and even love these penitentiary psychodramas in which some quiescent belle, falls in love with some incarcerated sex fiend. However, the main tragedy of womankind, of which this is but a paltry sideshow, goes unnoticed. As I say in my book, the women who once ruled the world are now content to serve its destroyers. What has happened? As Voltaire said, the ancient Romans built their greatest masterpieces of architecture, for wild beasts to fight in. Now, having projected his anger onto the world, says the Course in Miracles, man sees vengeance about to strike at him, his own attacks thus perceived as self-defense. Get it? When fear unites with knowledge, says the ancient Maya books, terrible things are done. Well, Vico knew about it, Plato knew about it, that what happens in the psyche is, the cycles of the psyche manifest as the cycles of history. First you have chaos, then theocracy, then aristocracy, democracy, and then as the republics become imperial or tyrannous, they collapse and we're back to chaos again. But it's not historical cycles. It's articulated to our inner cycles. Now there's a time in which the simple shadow work, given that you're doing it, by the way, but there's even a time that even if you are doing the simple shadow work, that can sometimes prove not enough to help clean the psyche. When we are not integrated internally, and when our own masculine and feminine aspects are imbalanced, we invariably turn to external representatives to restore a semblance of stability. We turn to parents, heroes, politicians, evangelists, authority figures, whoever. We even turn to ideals and causes for that structure. And all manner of horrors have arisen as a result of that. Now, the approach of Pluto arouses fear, paranoia, and the whole cocktail of the darker toxic emotions. Subsequently, the individuals feel deeply insecure and as a result tend to cleave even more to these familiar Saturnian archetypes. The one that I'm mostly thinking of is Big Daddy. The male archetype. This preposterous archetype that habitually down through the centuries we have to deal with. And that's where the cult of the politician is so important. We have one right now. Let's note, ladies and gentlemen, the language. We're told there's a war on terror. Well, maybe it's the English in me, but the word terrorist and the word terrorism are very different than the word terror. There is a war on terror, all right, but it's of a psychological nature rather than a political one. So when you find yourself in a climate of atrocity and terror, find out what's happening inside your own self that's causing that into existence. And we know, as we've been looking at it, that this archetype of the father figure is nothing more than a rescripting of the old God lie from Jehovah. The concept is that you do not find vultures and carrion crows sitting in a Japanese tea garden. Right? Well, that's what these creatures are. So therefore, don't you see what they're doing? How wonderful to create an ambiance in the world full of mayhem, toxicity, cruelty, injustice. Because that's what they are inside. And you like your outward, you feel comfortable, don't you? In the ambiance that suits you. So a world of foment and all of us strangling and murdering each other. That's the world that they want to create for themselves. And America is very good at it. The normal round of warfare after World War II is a startling catalogue of atrocity. And archaeology supports the view that warfare is a development of only the past 10,000 years. The combined military expenditures of all the world's governments in 1987 were so large that all of the social programs of the United Nations could be financed for 300 years. And you're wondering why people are starving and we can't fix poverty. The ambiance must be full of paranoia and fear. That helps. So, as Edward Griffin, one of the great American scholars into this subject, says, you deliberately create the problems and then offer only those solutions which result in the expansion of government. You create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price to pay in return for domestic tranquility and world peace. So, we don't have the order within, and we are looking to Big Daddy to bring it in. And Big Daddy's only too happy to do it. To create false nemesis and false heroes and create a whole culture of fear and paranoia, this way to the paranoid society. Because they will bring you, as the imagery shows you, they will bring you an order. They will bring you the New World Order. But it will be a certain kind of order. It'll be the draconian or Orwellian order. As Orwell describes it, it's the boot stamping in the face of humanity forever. That'll be your order. The order of stand where you want, where you're told. Vaccinations, injections, and mind control. Is that the kind of order we want because we're not psychically in tune inside? That we're hypnotized by these individuals who use these talismanic words and terms? Security, strength, a stronger America? Enemies, safety? It's like some crazy movie where they're promising us safety and then saying, yeah, we'll give you safety, we'll give you security, but we'll do it through war. We have to have a war. The war is the expatiation, the processing of all that toxicity. And we feel good about it. Bush's ratings soared after the war was, initiated. Even though people said many hundreds of thousands of people might have to die. They said that's all right. His ratings soared. We have more to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, but we have to pause now. So in doing that, let me just thank you again for being here, for lending your time and your energy to our cause. Thank you very much.